several inches of snow, and Fred and I had gone outside to play. And we wrapped ourselves up warm because it was really icy cold those winters. And we went out there, and I was back of the Anderson shelter throwing snowballs over the top of it. Fred was out in front of the house, outside on the pavement. He was going along, and I threw a snowball. Usually I'm not a very good shot for hitting anything, but I threw this snowball, and he ducked down, and it hit an old man that was going along right on the neck. And he turned round. He had passed Fred, and he had turned round, and he looked at Freddie standing there with a snowball, and Freddie said, "I didn't do it, you know." Well, I ducked down behind the Anderson shelter, so he never knew, giggling and carrying on, you know, laughing. So that was always stood out in my mind, that snowball fight we had, where Freddie got the blame, and this man told him off, you know, and told him to be careful, and I felt sorry for the old man, but it was sort of funny that I could make a hit like that. For a time, they would have barrage balloons that they had anchored, you know, to the ground, and they had them in different parks. They were all over different areas, and they used to move them around, I don't know, keep the planes up higher or something, but they were stationed in the park across on the river, and mostly the girls in the Army, girls I think used to take care of that, and they used to bring them down, and you know, you see them all in different positions. I wasn't sure what they were actually for because the planes didn't come that low. Well, there was still talk about the secret weapon, and Freddie and I would always be looking up in the skies, looking for the parachutists to come down, take us over. All these Germans coming, but they never did come. And then one afternoon, there was a warning sound, and we were running up to the underground Lambeth Knoll station, as usual, and I saw this sort of a plane in the distance, but it was low. It was sort of coming down, and so there was, you know, explosion and everything, and so it was on for a little while, the air raid warning. Then the all clear went, and we went back home. Well, then that day in the newspaper it said, London plane shot down over London. German plane shot down over London. So it sounded sort of different, that plane, you know. And anyway, we didn't take much notice. Well, they all started coming over. There was all these planes, but they were the fly bombs, the buzz bombs, the V1s, as we called them. I read that beginning June 1944 through to March, I think, in 1945, the German bombers, they couldn't fly across the English Channel without being shot down. So that's when they fired the missiles, the V1s. And there was, I was just reading, 25,000 in Great Britain and Europe. They fired over a 9 months campaign they had of them. Attacks killed 12,685 people and 80% civilians. Wounded was 26,000 and people. So it was pretty bad with the buzz bombs. Although I would use that word duck so many times because, you know, they'd come over and they'd say duck, duck, everybody duck. You know, you'd hear this plane. They of course they came low. That's when they had the barrage balloons up. That's what they were for, to keep, you know, trying to stop the buzz bombs. Well, they'd come over and they rattle. The engines were They keep cutting in and off, and all of a sudden they stop. And then we used to count so many seconds and they hit the ground, then you'd hear the explosion. So, well, that's what we used to do with the buzz bombs, but the warning used to go and we used to run around with that. But that's what bothered me. When they stopped, everyone would say, duck, duck, duck. Oh, you duck underneath the table or go anywhere. So that got to be a real nuisance. Oh, and then sometimes before that, they used to have these planes, before the buzz bombs came on, they used to call them the nuisance raiders, real long, drawn out. You'd have to go, people went in shelters and try to find safe places to sleep. But the planes would just keep going over and over, and just one at a time, I think, and a couple of bombs drop, and then it'd be a little while, and then another plane would come over. It was just a nuisance, and just kept you down in the shelters, and it was so tiring. I was so, I want to go home, I want to go to bed, or take my clothes off or something. But, when the all clear went, that people started to get washed and do things. That was their time to do work and run around and get things done, cooking something, if there was any electricity or gas. See, that used to happen too. The electric used to go off, and the water, and everything went off, So you had to see that the kettles were filled up, and they did recommend you fill in the bathtub with water, from when you need it, and that was a real nuisance. So that's really, really drive you crazy. Anyway, these bombs, they used to say they were ours. Oh, they said it was one of ours, It was one of ours. They all belonged to us. They just sent them over. But that was a long time of those people, I think. Then after that, so we thought, well, that was the secret weapon, But it was getting towards like the end part of the war, and they were getting sort of desperate, I suppose, because the Germans were on the East Front fighting, and with the coming invasion and everything. And the V2s, they started up. They were supersonic rockets. And whilst I'm reading that about, they went, the V2 had a 1-ton warhead, and the V1 flew about 400 miles an hour with a maximum altitude about 3,000 feet, meaning the Allied fighter aircraft could shoot them down. The V2s was supersonic rocket, hitting the ground about 3,500 miles after flying a parabolic trajectory that reached an altitude of 60 miles. There was no defense against the V2. In fact, it was virtually no warning. Well, actually, I preferred the V2s because I said, well, you didn't have to, you just, the bomb would just explode and you didn't even hear it coming or something. So that's I used to tell my mom, well, you don't hear the one that's going to kill you. So I don't think that made her too thrilled her too much, but I said, well, I prefer that, so I didn't have to worry about getting down the shelter or anything, because you just go and it just goes off, So several of those came our way, close by too, and of course my dad went out helping them out. Right by Imperial War Museum, where the Imperial War Museum is. One fell right there across from some shops, and my dad was taking him out. And he told his little boy, I would make it a teddy bear. He got out from the rubble. I would make him a teddy, which I did. And so my dad, they were always giving me jobs to do, and with good deeds, Doreen will do it for you. She can make it. So that was, I'm trying to think where else they fell, but they were close by, too close for comfort. During the buzz bomb, before the V2s, when the V1s were, yeah, they did move all the barrage balloons outside of London, and they had a big defence, up trying to protect them getting into London, and they did shoot down a lot of them, They did knock them out before they got to London. But that was a long time. It seemed like a long time going on. Of course, by that time we hadn't been in the underground, sleeping down there for a very long time. Some people never did want to go down to the underground because there was, in the beginning part of the Blitz, a bomb had come down an air shaft in an underground, and it killed a lot of people under the ground. So that was a scare, and also there was always worried about the water coming from the Thames coming in, and there was all different places that people were scared about going to. They had these up in Kennington Park on the green there they had built. I don't think I've said this before, but there was a big underground. They were like tunnels and places for people to sleep, and it had a bomb in Kennington Park, and it killed a lot of people. So some people were scared. My mother was. Also, there was panic one time with the underground station, or coming out the doorway, out of the top. At the top, there a lot of people was crushed and killed. So there was a lot of that went on. Things, not always not written in the paper. Nope. We always, in a way, it was sort of exciting, except for hanging around and waiting, and but we had our comics, and I had my knitting and reading books. So everything looked so grey and grimy or something, a yellowish looking, the colour looked so dull. It seemed like another life to me. And, they had trouble with people lining up. They couldn't have enough coffins to bury people. There used to be lines up, like the funeral homes, people waiting in line. So, you get all those problems. In case anyone's interested, our pitch down on the underground was we stayed at Lambeth North Underground Station, and it went down in the elevator, and the lift followed the road, followed the tunnel to the platform, down the stairs, down a few stairs, and turned left, the first entrance, and then it was about 50 or 60 feet along the wall. That's where we used to pitch our blankets. And that's where we had our square. It was about, I guess, well, we didn't take too much space, but we just laid the blankets down. And, like I said before, that some people would even argue about place to, somebody moving up their pitch too much, taking more than they should do, and taking more each time they went down, taking more space. But anyway, I think we all handled it pretty well. When the buzz bombs would come over, we would, most likely, the mornings used to go during the daytime, all different times. But what we would do, we would run downstairs, out the front door, turn right down the steps, down to the basement, and go and try to get into the coal cellar. We had 2 coal cellars. Of course, we didn't have too much coal at the time. Years before, we used to have it filled up. The coalmen used to come and put coal down there, but during the war, that was hard to find coal. so it wasn't that much cold usually in there. But we used to all try to at least put our heads in there. It was always dark and get down there, which was sort of funny. I'll tell you about for a few months there. I don't know how long we had Judy. Judy was a dog, one of our dogs. It was a female that Bill had bought. He had seen this poor little Judy, this dog. She was old at the time, and I think she'd had a lot of pups, but he saw her at this marketplace, and I think he felt sorry for her. She was standing there in the sun, and Bill's a gentle type, and he bought Judy. He thought we could breed and get a pup because he loved Jinx so much. So she came to the house, and she'd be the first one down there, and she'd bark and carry on, and she'd run down. The dogs would be running down, and we'd be running down too. But Judy was she was wire-haired terrier. Bill had seen her, and like I said, he thought she'd be nice for. When my mother didn't know anything about her, but he took her, he brought her back, and when my mother, the dog ran in the house, jumped on her chair, on our soft chair, armchair, and lay down. And when my mother went to say hello to her, she sort of growled at her. My mother said, "Oh, I don't know if I like this dog." But I think the dog was just worn out and everything. But anyway, she never did have puppies. She got pregnant and that, but the puppies all died. And they took them, had a cesarean, but they didn't live, and she was just too old. But she was a good dog. But she would get us down there quick to the coal cellar. It was always fun, the dogs barking and us running down there. Bill bought Judy at an outdoor marketplace. There's sometimes this area that, people would take dogs down there or anything, and pets, and it sold everything. And they'd stand on the side of the road, and they'd, sell the dogs or anything. I think she must have been stolen. I don't know whether stolen or not, but he told this man that sold him to Bill, I think for a couple of pounds, told him this dog's name was Skipper, but that dog never knew the name Skipper, and we just called her Judy because she went with Jinx and Judy. So, but my mother really got to love that dog, and she was a good dog. But too bad she was old. But she did have a nice, the last couple of years in her life was pretty good. And so, so she was happy. The Americans are still around from Piccadilly, and they'd come in for the day and go out in the evening time again. And you started to see them walking around with girls, and so they made themselves at home. They used to have. It was sort of always a joke with us. They had lots of medals on them, and we wondered what they got the medals for, arriving in England, getting over here without being seasick. There was a lot of jokes. Of course, I've sort of enjoyed it because I've seen it on both sides, I've been as an English woman and talking about the Yanks and the Americans, and then I've also been an American, and I'm like, well, I've been American more than an English person now, but you can't take that English way away from me, and there's still a lot of English in me. I believe it's given me a different, value about life and what to appreciate more. So I'm not sorry I went through that. I'm glad I did, but since no one was killed close by except for Ruby, and We didn't even, we didn't, poor Rose, she never had even his body or anything to remember him by, except I think his name is on in a couple of books on the St. Clement Danes Church in Trafalgar Square. I think there's a whole big book about the people that was lost, killed in the war on the planes. He was a flight engineer training from Lancaster bombers. We understood when we got the word that he was like missing, presumed killed, that we thought the plane had come back. It'd been on a big raid, and we'd heard it blown up. It had coming back from Germany, and Rube had been on a lot of big places, bombing runs. So we heard the plane just blew up and he died. And that was in Coningsby in Lancashire. Well, that went on, and just a few years ago, I think one of Rube's brothers, Derek or Fred, no, it wasn't Fred, it was Derek, I think, found out what really happened. They had been on a big bombing raid and got back, and the plane was all shot up. Well, what they would do was, go over those planes, because they'd have to make them fit to go back again, make them useful and repair them. And so he was back in his base, and then somebody else had a plane that they was going to take up to check it out. It had been worked on, So they said that they took this plane up, and Rube didn't have to even get in the plane. But his name was Reuben. I think after a brother Rose's brother was killed in the First World War, and he said he would go up with them too. I guess he was gung-ho type, and he went up. They said it went up there. He just took a dive and just went nose head right down into the ground. He never got anything left. He was just blown to pieces, which was terribly sad, since he'd only been married about a year to a lovely girl named May. She was a beautiful-looking girl, and she tried to keep, friends with Rose, and she wished she was pregnant, but she wasn't. And she kept up, but she met another man, gentleman, and he didn't want to see Rose, which was sort of sad. So she lost touch with them. I don't know. I believe she went on and had a couple of children of her own.